Okay, so ready to dive in. Today we're tackling Navigating Leadership by Rear Admiral Garry E.
USN retired.
Right, of course, retired. I always find it fascinating to explore leadership lessons from those with military backgrounds.
Absolutely. And this book, it's not just for like CEOs or, top brass.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
What struck me was how Admiral Hall's insights from his Navy career, they're so applicable to, well, pretty much anyone who wants to, motivate and guide others.
Whether it's at work, at home, in your community. Yeah.
Exactly.
And for this deep dive, we've got a ton of great source material to work with.
Oh, yeah.
We're looking at forewords from some impressive folks, Lieutenant General John Sattler, Bishop William D. Byrne.
Oh, and General Joe Dunford, too, right?
Can't forget him. And, of course, we've got Admiral Hall's own note, the introduction, table of contents. It's like the blueprint of his leadership philosophy.
I love that blueprint.
Yeah. And we've also zeroed in on specific chapters, the ones that really get to the heart of his core leadership principles.
So, listeners, get ready, because your mission today is to walk away with some serious, actionable leadership strategies.
Exactly. We're going to unpack Admiral Hall's journey, those key moments that shaped his perspective, and the fundamental principles he hammers home.
The goal: we're going to give you those practical insights you can put to use right away. No waiting. Okay, so Admiral Hall starts off strong. He says, where you start never determines where you will end up.
And his own story really embodies that, doesn't it? Like, he actually failed third grade.
Right. Third grade, it makes you realize everyone starts somewhere.
Yeah, and it's so relatable. But he points to his second third grade teacher, Mrs. Paintner, as a turning point.
She believed in him when maybe others didn't.
Exactly. And it just shows how powerful it can be when someone sees your potential. It can totally change your path.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Despite having what he describes as a modest background, dysfunctional parents,
he had this burning desire to be something more, this drive was there from the very beginning.
It wasn't just a wish, though, was it? He actively sought out leadership roles, even back in high school.
Totally. Yearbook editor, co-captain of the gymnastics team.
Oh, and the cannon crew. He was leading the cannon crew and the spirit club.
Yeah, and those might not seem like, high-stakes leadership positions.
But they were his training ground, right? He was learning how to organize, motivate people, even then.
Exactly.
But even with those early leadership roles, becoming a commissioned officer, it wasn't a straight shot for him.
Nope, he first enlisted in the Navy, but his goal was clear. He wanted to go to the Naval Academy.
And that led him to the Naval Academy prep school for a year. Talk about commitment.
Seriously, he knew what he wanted, and he was willing to put in the work. Now, something I found really interesting was Admiral Hall's emphasis on wit and wisdom. He didn't fit that stereotype of, the super serious, unapproachable military leader.
Not at all. He even tells this hilarious story about his time in the White House, this exchange he had with a security officer.
Oh, yeah, about the president needing a foot massage.
Exactly. It's a funny anecdote, but it also highlights a really important point. Humor. When used well, it can make leaders more human, more relatable.
And that builds trust, even in those really formal settings.
Absolutely. But for Admiral Hall, wit wasn't just about cracking jokes.
Nope. He believed it could actually help break down barriers between leaders and their teams.
Right. It makes communication more open, less intimidating, and it just creates a better environment for everyone.
Even when the pressure's on, humor can help. Now, this next part, I think it's crucial for anyone, whether you're leading a team or just navigating life. Admiral Hall really emphasizes the difference between leadership and management.
This is huge.
He says leadership is about doing the right thing, whereas management is doing things right.
And he uses this really relatable example, something about his son Sam coming across someone bleeding on the sidewalk.
Right. And Sam's immediate response, to help the person. That's leadership. It's instinctive.
It's about taking action when it matters. Then, the steps you take to make sure the person is safe, to call for help, those are management skills.
It's doing things effectively, following the process.
And Admiral Hall's point is, you need both.
Exactly. Elite leadership, as he calls it, that's when you combine doing the right thing with doing things right.
It's not one or the other, it's both.
And this leads perfectly into one of the central ideas in the book, the PACT of leadership.
I love this. PACT. So what does that stand for?
Passion, accountability, commitment, and understanding the traits and traditions of those influential leaders who came before you.
He describes it as an agreement, alliance, and notably a covenant that shall not be broken or forgotten.
It's serious stuff. It's about a deep, unwavering dedication to a particular way of leading.
And the story of how this PACT came about, it's pretty revealing. It wasn't from some fancy leadership seminar. It's a personal experience.
Yeah, a Navy dinner party where he came across as, well, a little too confident.
A little cocky, maybe.
Maybe, but the feedback he got, it really made him reflect on his leadership style.
Those moments where you have to look in the mirror, they can be tough.
They can be, but they can also be the catalyst for real growth. Okay, let's break down the PACT. First up, passion and purpose.
So Admiral Hall says passion is this strong and barely controllable emotion.
And right away, he connects this to his wife, Darlene. He calls her his compass, the source of his passion.
And there's that great story about their first meeting at, what was it, Trini's Jolly Beggar?
Yeah, and the jean jacket incident, it's hilarious. He had to overcome this initial judgment to connect with her.
I love that he shares these personal stories. It makes the idea of passion so relatable.
And professionally, his passion was fueled by wanting to make Darlene proud and be the best pilot he could be.
It wasn't just about climbing the ladder. It was deeper than that.
Much deeper. He even quotes Coach Nick Saban, the legendary football coach, about the 5 choices we have regarding performance. And to be elite, you need that burning desire, that passion.
It's not enough to just be good at something. You have to love it.
Absolutely. And he tells this great story contrasting the Seagull pilot instructor with the one who's truly passionate about flying and teaching.
The passionate ones, they're the ones who jump at the tough missions, who really invest in their students.
They lead early and often. It's that difference between just showing up and being all in.
Okay, next up, accountability.
This one's non-negotiable for Admiral Hall. He says, accountability can only rest with one individual and cannot be delegated.
Someone has to own the outcomes, the good and the bad.
No passing the buck. And he traces this back to his time at the Naval Academy, that culture of taking responsibility.
It's ingrained in everything they do. Those responses, yes, sir, mom, no excuse, sir, mom. Mm-hmm. It's about owning your actions.
And then there's a principle of never bilging a classmate, basically never throwing someone under the bus.
It's about having each other's backs, but also taking responsibility for your own choices.
He also makes this distinction between personal and professional accountability. And he tells a cautionary tale about a second-in-command on an amphibious assault ship.
Oh, yeah, the guy who lacked personal accountability.
And it ended up affecting the entire ship, his career, everything. It shows how your character outside of work, it matters.
Big time. Because who you are as a person, it bleeds into your professional life.
100%. Okay, moving on to the C in PACT, commitment to the mission.
Admiral Hall uses this fantastic analogy here.
The diner's grand slam.
I know, right? He compares commitment to that classic breakfast, eggs, hash browns, toast, bacon.
All the good stuff.
And each card is essentially, you can't have a grand slam without all the components.
And within that analogy, he introduces the idea of being the pig in the breakfast.
Meaning you're fully committed, all in. You're not just the chicken contributing a little bit here and there.
You're the essential ingredient that makes the whole thing work.
I love that.
Yeah.
And he gives an example from his time leading a Navy Seahawk helicopter squadron in Japan.
Yeah. And it wasn't just his commitment, it was his whole family. They embraced the mission, even his kids.
It shows how commitment can be contagious. It can spread to those around you.
Absolutely. Finally, we have the T in PACT, traditions, traits, and behaviors. And Admiral Hall gets really honest here, especially about humility.
He admits it's been a struggle for him, that he's had to work at it.
Yeah, he says he used to indulge in arrogance, and he learned the hard way that an inflated ego just pushes people away.
It's refreshing to hear someone admit that,
Yeah.
It makes him more human.
And he stresses how important it is to align your personal traits with your leadership style. If you value things like integrity, compassion, arrogance just gets in the way.
Makes sense. He talks about his time as an aide to Admiral Etchison, a very demanding admiral.
And how that experience challenged his own overconfidence.
And again, Darlene, his wife, she plays this key role. She gave him that honest feedback, that come to Jesus moment about his priorities.
Sometimes you need someone to call you out, to help you see things more clearly.
Totally. And once he found that balance between his personal and professional life,
his squadron thrived. They won awards, morale was high. It proves that a well-rounded leader is a more effective leader.
And he shares this really impactful story about Father William Byrne and the litany of humility.
It's a powerful reminder to constantly check your ego and put the needs of others first.
It's a practice, not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
So building on these traits, Admiral Hall then digs into trust and empowerment.
He talks about the speed of trust as a critical resource.
It's the foundation of any high-performing team, really.
And you earn trust by consistently demonstrating those PACT principles: responsibility, humility, commitment.
It all ties together. He gives this really compelling example from his time dealing with piracy off the coast of Somalia. The trust within his staff allowed them to act quickly, decisively.
But his successor, who didn't have that same level of trust with his team,
They were much slower to respond. It really highlights the impact trust has on a team's effectiveness.
and empowerment flows naturally from trust. Admiral Hall talks about delegating big responsibilities to junior officers, like getting the ship underway in San Diego Harbor.
Talk about a high-pressure situation.
Yeah.
But those officers, they rose to the occasion.
It gave them this incredible opportunity to learn, to lead, to feel that sense of accomplishment.
Okay, so we've got this solid understanding of the PACT framework.
Yeah.
How does Admiral Hall see this being applied proactively?
Especially when it comes to creating a compelling vision and setting clear goals.
Well, he draws on John Cotter's 8 steps of change, specifically the idea of creating a sense of urgency. But Admiral Hall takes it a step further.
He talks about creating a compelling vision.
It's about getting the team excited, inspired by painting a clear picture of the future.
And he uses his first leadership role as officer in charge of Detachment 5 as an example.
He didn't just dictate his vision, he involved the whole team.
And they came up with this shared goal to be the best detachment.
When everyone feels like they're part of creating the vision, they're more likely to be committed to it.
Absolutely. But Admiral Hall stresses that a vision without a plan is just a daydream.
You need timelines, specific actions, clear responsibilities. He talks about the importance of developing a POAM, a plan of action, and milestones.
It's like a detailed roadmap for achieving the vision.
Exactly. And he also brings in Napoleon Hill's 6-step process for goal setting, from Think and Grow Rich.
Specificity, deadlines, detailed plans, writing it all down.
He's a big believer in the power of writing down your goals, making them real.
It's about engaging different parts of your brain, solidifying those intentions.
So, to really bring this to life, Admiral Hall uses a case study, a comparison of 2 oil change franchises.
It's a great way to see how leadership, or the lack of it, directly affects a business.
The successful franchise, they embody the PCT principles. The employees are engaged, accountable, and it shows in their customer satisfaction and their bottom line.
Then you have the struggling franchise where poor leadership is clearly hurting them. It's a stark contrast.
Which brings us to what Admiral Hall calls the leadership bottom line.
Increasing currency without increasing costs.
And he defines currency broadly. It's not just about money.
It could be employee retention, operational readiness, any key performance indicator for an organization.
And his point is, good leadership can improve all these areas, which ultimately saves money in the long run.
Less turnover, fewer mistakes, greater efficiency.
His advice to junior leaders is so practical. Embody the PCT, lead by example, be passionate, accountable, committed.
He even gives these 4 simple steps for young leaders. Be on time and rested, be clean in mind and body, do more than expected, work with a smile.
Timeless advice. And in today's world, with so many people working remotely, he has this warning about keyboard courage.
It's that tendency to be less considerate, less professional when you're communicating online.
It's easy to hide behind a screen, but good leadership, it requires genuine human connection no matter where you're working.
Now, it's important to acknowledge that leadership, it's not always a walk in the park. Admiral Hall talks about the price of leadership, the sacrifices you have to make.
He's honest about his own struggles, how he used to prioritize his ego and his career over his family.
It's a reminder that sometimes you have to make tough choices.
But he also emphasizes the importance of seeking feedback, being open to changing course.
And to really listen to those around you. He tells a story about a near collision at sea.
Oh yeah, where a junior sailor's observation was initially dismissed.
It could have been disastrous. But it highlights how crucial it is to listen to everyone, regardless of their rank or experience.
Because good ideas can come from anywhere. Finally, we get to the last chapter, choosing greatness.
Where Admiral Hall compares leadership to navigation.
He talks about how we rely on GPS to get us where we're going. But just like sailing, leadership has all these unpredictable variables. You have to constantly adjust course.
He introduces what he calls the choice equation. Choices plus errors plus acknowledging errors equals rerouting.
Meaning, it's better to make small corrections early on than to try and recover from a big mistake later.
And he tells this great story about using his whistle as captain of the USS Tarawa.
To address a sailor who made a bad decision.
It's about setting clear expectations and being proactive. He also encourages us to really examine our everyday choices.
How do those choices align with our overall vision?
He concludes by saying, leaders plant seeds of accomplishment, and the impact of that leadership, it's immeasurable.
It ripples outward. And his final message: be authentic, adapt those core principles to your own journey.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to leadership.
Now, Admiral Hall also includes this really helpful appendix about the 3 levels of leadership.
Tactical, operational, and strategic.
So tactical leadership, that's about the here and now. It's those technical skills, managing individuals, making sure things get done on a daily basis.
Think of a shift supervisor at a restaurant.
Exactly. Then you have operational leadership, which is about leading teams of leaders, empowering subordinates, allocating resources.
So maybe a department head making sure their team's goals align with the company's overall strategy.
Right. And then there's strategic leadership.
Yeah.
That's about the long-term vision, the big picture.
Like a CEO charting the course for the company 5-10 years down the road.
Admiral Hall stresses the importance of knowing which level you're operating at and adapting your skills accordingly.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Admiral Hall's navigating leadership, it really comes back to that PACT framework.
Passion, accountability, commitment, traits, and traditions.
It's about knowing yourself, always learning, and leading with integrity.
And remember, leadership isn't just about a title or a position.
It's about your ability to influence and motivate those around you, no matter where you are in life.
So think about your own leadership, PACT. Which of Admiral Hall's principles resonate with you?
What challenges are you facing? What are your aspirations?
And here's a final thought. Admiral Hall talks a lot about continuous leadership development. So what's one small step you can take today to invest in your own leadership journey?
No matter where you are on that path, there's always room to grow.
So get out there and lead.
And navigate wisely.